The hotel alarm went off right as I was pouring more coffee. Two guests in the most expensive suite had collapsed on the carpet, eyes rolled back, lips purple. When the paramedics pulled the oxygen masks away to check identities, I finally saw them. The man was my husband, and the woman shaking beside him was my daughter-in-law. What they did not know is that I paved the entire road that led them to this room. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 58 years old, though most nights I feel closer to 80. My shift at the Silver Maple Suites in the coastal city of Bay Ridge starts when the sun gives up and the streetlights take over. This hotel is not grand, but it is persistent, much like the dull ache in my lower back, a souvenir from a life I would rather forget. But my eyes are still sharp. After all this time, I have grown accustomed to the darkness. I am more comfortable in the artificial 24-hour glow of the lobby than I ever am in the harsh light of day. The night shift has its own rhythm. It is a slow, steady pulse, measured by the clock on the wall. The silence of the main corridor is thick, broken only by the reliable hum of the ice machine on the second floor and the rattling breath of the air conditioning units. The air smells of industrial carpet cleaner and something vaguely old, something that can never be scrubbed away, no matter how hard the day staff tries. You see things on the night shift that the day shift cannot imagine. People check in when they do not want to be seen. Their secrets are heavier after midnight, and I have learned to be a very quiet, very patient audience. They arrived well past 1 in the morning, long after the city had gone to sleep. A sophisticated couple, requesting the penthouse suite. They signed the register as Mr. and Mrs. Carter. I looked at the man's posture, the way he held his shoulders, rigid and self-important. Something about it snagged at my memory, a familiar, unwelcome line. But the lobby lighting is kept low, intentionally yellow and forgiving, and the woman beside him wore a fashionable, wide-brimmed hat that cast her face entirely in shadow. I dismissed it. At this hour, strangers are just strangers, fleeting shapes in the dim light. But my stomach tightened. I watched the woman's hand, her nails perfectly manicured, squeeze the man's arm. It was not a grip of affection. It was a grip of anxious ownership, a silent warning. The man, Mr. Carter, kept his gaze fixed on the elevator bank, anywhere but on my face. He refused to make eye contact with the old woman behind the desk. When I spoke, my voice neutral as I confirmed the room rate, I saw it a tiny, uncontrollable tremor in the corner of his mouth. He recognized my voice. The irregularities piled up quietly, like dust motes in a shaft of moonlight. "We will not require housekeeping services," the woman said, her voice smooth but firm, cutting me off before I could explain the schedule. They insisted on paying the full 3-night deposit in cash, peeling off crisp $100 bills. When I asked for the license plate for the parking garage, the man waved his hand, annoyed. "We do not want the car registered, just park it." And the woman, from beneath the shadow of her hat, kept glancing up. Not at me, but at the small, black dome of the security camera above my head. The alarm was a shriek, cutting through the silence 2 hours later. A smoke detector on the 4th floor. Their floor. I grabbed the master key, and Lucas, the young security guard, ran with me. The elevator was too slow. We took the stairs, our footsteps echoing in the concrete well. The smell hit us first when we reached the landing acrid smoke, stale alcohol, and the sharp, chemical odor of something metallic. The door to their suite was open just a crack. The television was still on, blaring some late-night infomercial, casting pulsing blue light on the scene inside. Lucas pushed the door open. They were on the floor. Two bodies, tangled in the plush carpet, not far from the doorway. Lucas was already on his radio, his voice cracking as he called for paramedics. I just stood there, frozen in the doorway, the world slowing to a crawl. The paramedics arrived quickly, their movements efficient and loud, shattering the deep quiet of the hotel. They turned the man over. One of them shone a bright penlight into his eyes, illuminating his face, pulling him from the shadows of the room. The air left my lungs. Time stretched and snapped back. I was not in a hotel. I was in my kitchen 20 years ago, looking at this same face as it lied to me over breakfast. The face was older now, sagging with debt and deceit. But it was his, Franklin Hayes, my husband, the man who had abandoned me, the man who had taken everything. Then a paramedic gently moved the woman. She was groaning, her wide-brimmed hat knocked aside. The light caught her face as she turned her head, her expensive makeup smeared. The second truth hit me, harder than the first. It was Vanessa, my son's wife, my daughter-in-law. My first instinct was not grief. It was not even shock. It was a cold, pure hatred that settled in my stomach like ice. Lucas was looking at me, his own face pale. Mrs. Hayes, do you know them? I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply stepped back, leaning against the hallway wall for support, my hand going instinctively to my throat, to the old, thin chain I always wear, my son's chain. I watched them work, frantic. I watched as they strapped Franklin to the gurney, his eyes fluttering. As they wheeled them both past me toward the elevator, I looked up, above the door. The security camera's small red light was blinking steadily. Good, I thought, the words clear and solid in my head. Everything is being recorded, just as I planned. It feels like another lifetime, not just a few years ago. Before the silver maple sweets, before the smell of stale carpet and antiseptic defined my nights. I was Eleanor Hayes of Riverbend. I was a wife. I was a mother. My world was the immaculate lawn of our suburban split level. My days were measured in laundry loads and the scent of pot roast, orbits defined by two men, my husband, Franklin, and our son, Liam. Franklin was a good man. Or rather, he was excellent at appearing to be a good man. For over 20 years, he was a mid-level manager at Northbridge Mutual. He had the firm handshake, the easy smile, and the perfect anecdote for neighborhood barbecues. He knew how to make people feel comfortable. Of course, there were the other times, the sudden, brief flashes of cold anger over a misplaced bill or a dinner that was 5 minutes late. I always excused it. Pressure at work. I told myself, a man has pressure. Liam was my light. He was the quiet, thoughtful child who grew into a kind, intelligent man. He found his passion not in spreadsheets like his father, but in music, becoming a sound engineer. He brought the world into our quiet house. And then he brought Vanessa. She was everything I was not: young, vibrant, effortlessly charming. She walked into our lives, and at first, she seemed like the perfect daughter I never had. I welcomed her with an open heart. I remember that first dinner she came over, after they were serious. We sat on the back patio, drinking wine that cost less than $10 a bottle. Liam was holding her hand under the table, his eyes shining in a way I had not seen since he was a boy. Franklin seemed satisfied, playing the part of the proud patriarch. It felt perfect. It was the American family advertisement, and I was foolish enough to believe it was real. The cracks started small. So small, you blame your own eyes for seeing them. It was Franklin holding his gaze on Vanessa just a second too long when she bent over to clear the plates. It was the way his hand brushed hers, lingering, when he passed the salt. Then came the cell phone. He, who had never password-protected anything, suddenly started clearing his text messages, angling the screen away if I walked past his chair. When I finally found the courage to ask, gently, if everything was all right, the dismissal was swift. Franklin laughed, a hollow sound. He told me I was watching too many daytime television dramas. Vanessa was smoother. She would put her arm around my shoulder, her voice dripping with false concern, telling me I was just stressed about money, that I was reading into things. I was being paranoid, an old woman's folly. Then the real storm hit. Franklin announced he had been laid off, part of a massive downsizing at Northbridge. The timing, in retrospect, was perfect. Almost immediately. Vanessa started pressuring Liam about buying a house, insisting they put the deed in both their names for tax convenience. And Franklin, my responsible, careful husband, suggested I move my entire retirement savings, the nest egg from my own mother, into a new high-yield investment he was managing. To help the family, he said. I signed the papers. I sat at a polished mahogany desk while a man in an expensive suit droned on about trusts and liability and yields. The words were cold, sterile, and I understood none of them. But I looked at Franklin, my husband of decades, and I looked at the future I wanted for Liam, and I trusted them. I signed where they told me to sign. That night, I woke up needing water. The house was dark. As I neared the kitchen, I heard whispers. Franklin and Vanessa. Their voices were low, urgent. I froze, my hand on the doorframe. I only caught a few words, sharp and clear in the silence, from Vanessa. She will not remember any of it. Not at this age. That seed of doubt I felt in the kitchen was just the beginning. The real nightmare started a year later. Liam, my Liam, went boating with friends. There was an accident. The police report was clinical, detached. Accidental drowning. No signs of foul play. The words were meaningless. My son was gone. I shattered. The world lost its colour, its sound, its meaning. At the funeral, I remember seeing Vanessa, distraught, collapsing onto Franklin's shoulder for support. Everyone saw it as a tragedy, a terrible, senseless act of fate. I moved through the funeral like a ghost. I was there, but I was not. I was a shadow in a black dress, accepting condolences I could not hear. Franklin handled everything. He was efficient, dry-eyed, accepting handshakes and managing the caterers. Vanessa was the perfect picture of the grieving widow, dressed in impeccable black. I watched her, numb, as she would let out a theatrical sob, perfectly timed, whenever a new group of mourners approached. In the haze that followed, I only wanted to make things right for Vanessa. She was all I had left of him. I told Franklin I wanted to sign over whatever assets were left in my name to her. It was, I thought, what Liam would have wanted. Franklin encouraged it immediately, his voice heavy with false sincerity, telling me it was a noble gesture, that it was exactly what Liam would have desired. Vanessa, when I told her, simply wept, dabbing her eyes and whispering her gratitude. The months that followed are a blur. That is when the gaps started. I would find my keys in the refrigerator. I would walk into the living room and have no memory of why I was there. More than once, I left the stove on, the smell of burning gas filling the kitchen before Franklin or Vanessa found it. Franklin would sigh, his patience performative. "Eleanor, your age is catching up to you," he would say, almost kindly. Vanessa was the one who suggested I see a specialist. A memory expert, she knew. Someone who could help. The clinic was in a part of town I did not recognize. It felt temporary, the furniture cheap. The doctor, a man named Hallister, had a smile that did not reach his eyes. He asked me a series of leading questions. "Do you often feel confused? Mrs. Hayes, do you find yourself misplacing items frequently?" Before I could answer, Franklin would jump in. "All the time, doctor. She forgets appointments. She forgot her own birthday last month." He would list things that were not true, or small slips twisted into proof of decline. I sat there, small and confused, and for the first time, I began to wonder if they were right. Was I losing my mind, Dr. Hallister prescribed what he called mild sedatives and a new memory support medication. "Just to take the edge off and help you focus," he said, patting my hand. Vanessa immediately took charge. She bought one of those plastic pill organizers, the kind with sections for every day of the week, and filled it for me. "I will handle this, Mum," she said, her voice full of care. "You just rest." And I did rest. I slept. Heavily. The pills made me groggy, wrapping my mind in a thick fog. I would wake up in the afternoon, unsure if it was Tuesday or Wednesday, the days melting into one another. My world shrank to the four walls of my house, my life managed by my pillbox. One afternoon, I was drifting in that twilight state on the sofa. I heard Vanessa's voice from the kitchen, sharp and clear on her phone. "No, she remembers nothing," she said, and she laughed. "The report is almost done. After that, the house is ours." A cold shock went through me, but just as quickly, the fog rolled back in. By the time she hung up and came into the living room, I was already doubting myself. Had I dreamed it? It must have been a dream. That is when Franklin brought out the brochures. They were glossy, expensive, full of pictures of smiling seniors, silver willows and Pinecrest estates, high-end assisted living for people with memory issues. He spoke about it gently, about how they could not give me the care I needed, how this would be safer. I looked at the pictures, at the vacant expressions of the people sitting by sunny windows, and I felt a primal, suffocating fear. The final blow came a week later. I was looking for a postage stamp in Franklin's desk, an act that felt like a transgression in my fuzzy state. I found a folder with my name on it. It was a financial document, full of legal jargon. But I saw the words, highlighted in yellow, partially incapacitated. I confronted Franklin, the paper shaking in my hand. He took it from me calmly. "Eleanor, that is just legal jargon. It is for the insurance, to make sure your bills get paid if you forget." His voice was soothing, but my eyes had dropped to the bottom of the page. I saw the signature, clear and bold, Dr. Hallister. I did not understand what it all meant. Not really. I only knew that a door had just been locked, and I was on the wrong side of it. The miracle came from incompetence. Vanessa rushing out for a spa day that was really a meeting with a realtor, was arguing with Franklin on the phone. She just tossed the weekly pill organizer at me, and it skittered off the nightstand. I fumbled for it, and one of the blue evening pills rolled under the heavy dresser, lost in the dust. I was too tired, too foggy to care, and simply took the remaining one. One pill instead of two. That night, I woke up at 3 a.m, but I was not waking into the usual chemical fog. I was awake. My mind felt sharp, like a tool that had been left to rust and was suddenly, shockingly, clean. The air in the house was cold and still. And then I heard them. Voices. They were low, coming from the garage. I slipped out of bed, my feet silent on the carpet. The door to the garage was cracked. I leaned close, my heart a cold, hard knot in my chest. It was Vanessa, and she was furious. $600,000. Franklin. That is the final offer from the loan shark. 600,000, or he sends Victor. Selling the house covers it. Franklin's voice was a low growl of pure frustration. We sell the house. We pay him off. We put her in Silver Willows. And we are gone. It is done. It is not done, she hissed back. It is not done until she is in that home and we are on a plane. You told me she already signed the incapacity papers. Why is the lawyer dragging his feet? I leaned against the hallway wall, my hand covering my mouth to stifle the sound that wanted to escape. It was not dementia. It was not old age. It was them. The pills were not for my memory. They were to destroy it. The fog, the missed appointments, the stove, it was all them. The realization was not a wave of sadness. It was a physical, stabbing pain, like a heart attack. A betrayal so complete it stole my breath. They were not just stealing from me. They were erasing me. The next morning, when Vanessa handed me my pills with her false, bright smile, I smiled back. My hand, the one they thought was so frail, was perfectly steady. I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and tipped the contents of the Wednesday compartment into my palm. I looked at the small blue pills that had stolen months of my life, and I flushed them down the toilet. I opened my old vitamin bottle, the one they never touched, and found the B-complex tablets. The color was almost the same. I placed one in the empty slot. From that moment, I became the finest actress of my life. I shuffled more. I looked more confused. I would ask what day it was 3 times before breakfast. They never suspected a thing. And while I played the part of the fading matriarch, I became a spy in my own home. I used the old smartphone Liam had bought me. The one I had pretended was too complicated to learn. I kept it in the pocket of my bathrobe, always on, always ready. When Franklin left his briefcase open, I photographed the legal documents inside. When he and Vanessa argued in the kitchen, believing I was napping, I was recording every word. One afternoon, Franklin took me to his lawyer. Ravens and Holt. The plaque on the door said, "Just a few more papers to sign. Eleanor," he said, patting my arm. "Just protecting your future." The lawyer spoke in a rapid monotone, the words designed to be confusing. "This simply finalizes the power of attorney," he said, tapping a page. "And this confirms your agreement to transfer assets into the primary trust for your own care." I just nodded, my eyes vacant, my expression mild. But my hand, deep in my robe pocket, was gripping the phone, the small red light of the audio recorder glowing unseen. I was capturing every single lie. That night, I reviewed the evidence. The photographs I took confirmed my worst fears. My house, the house Liam grew up in, was no longer in my name. It was owned by the F&V Family Trust, controlled entirely by Franklin and Vanessa. Worse, I found a copy of a letter from Dr. Hallister to the lawyer, attached to my medical file. It described me as prone to paranoid delusions and an unreliable narrator of her own experiences. They were not just taking my money, they were taking my credibility. They were building a legal fortress so that if I ever tried to fight back, I would be dismissed as a crazy old woman. I was desperate. I had proof, but I was legally defined as insane. I needed help from the outside. I thought of Deborah, my oldest friend from church. I managed to copy one document, the trust transfer. During a moment, Franklin was distracted. I met her for coffee, a rare outing Vanessa had approved, thinking it would reinforce my decline. Deborah, I know this sounds strange, I whispered, pushing the paper across the table. But I need you to look at this. Just look at my signature. Deborah put on her reading glasses. She read the document, and her face went pale. Oh, Eleanor, she said, her voice trembling. This is your signature, but it is not right. It is shaky, weak. It looks just like my mother's did after her stroke, when she was on all that heavy medication. My goodness, child, what have they done to you? The validation was all I needed. That night, I went into my bathroom and looked in the mirror. For the first time in a year, I saw myself. Not the confused, frail creature they were building, but me, Eleanor Hayes, a widow, a mother, and a fool. But not anymore. I gripped the small, cold chain around my neck, Liam's chain. I am not going to let them bury me alive. Liam, I whispered to the woman in the glass. They think I am gone. They think I am stupid. But this time, Mama is playing their game. Deborah did not just offer sympathy, she offered a lifeline. The next day, she drove me to a small, dusty office above a coffee shop. The name on the door just said, M. Doyle, Investigations. Marcus Doyle was a man who looked like he had seen everything and been impressed by nothing. He was retired from the fraud division of a major insurance company, and his face was a roadmap of cynicism. He listened, arms crossed, as I told my story. I could see the skepticism. I was just another old woman complaining about her family. Then I played the recordings. I showed him the photographs of the trust documents. His posture changed. He leaned forward, listening intently to the audio from the lawyer's office. Well, damn, he said, rubbing his jaw. If it is not the classic asset stripping playbook, they are not even being original. His energy shifted from skeptical to strategic. He gave me clear, cold instructions. First, he said, you are done with those pills. I will get you an appointment with a real doctor, a neurologist I trust, for an independent evaluation tomorrow. We need a baseline proving you are clean. Second, you start a journal. Tonight. Every time Franklin or Vanessa corrects you, you write down what really happened. Time, date, the exact lie. We are building your credibility. Marcus moved fast. He was a creature of records and databases. Within 2 days, he had a file on Dr. Hallister. Our doctor has a history, Marcus told me over a secure phone he had given me. Multiple complaints over the last 10 years. Families trying to get control of an elderly relative's estate. He provides the fake psychiatric reports. The problem is, it is always the family's word against the doctor's, and the victim is usually too medicated to testify. He is the missing link we need. The next phase required me to be brave. Marcus came to the house while Franklin and Vanessa were running errands, likely meeting with realtors. He looked like an electrician checking the wiring. In under 10 minutes, he had replaced the old-fashioned wall clock in our dining room with an identical one. This one had a lens. The very next night, it paid off. "Mom, I told you. Your appointment is Thursday," Franklin said with exaggerated patience. The camera recorded me answering clearly. "No, Franklin, you said Tuesday at 10? It captured him shaking his head, sighing for Vanessa's benefit. "See, she is getting worse." Marcus also followed me to my next checkup with Hallister. He sat in his car across the street, filming. He got it all Franklin sliding a thick white envelope to the receptionist. And later, Dr. Hallister himself, smiling as he slipped that same envelope into his desk drawer. While I was playing the victim, Marcus was digging into the past. He went back to Liam. He pulled the old police reports, the witness statements from the boating trip, and he found it. A preliminary toxicology report from an independent lab, one that had been overlooked in the final police summary. It showed an unusual compound in Liam's system, mixed with the alcohol. It was not just that he was drunk, it was that the alcohol itself was suspect. "This is not definitive, Eleanor," Marcus warned me gently, "but it is wrong. It does not smell right." That night, the weight of it all nearly broke me. It was one thing to be robbed. It was another to be poisoned, to be erased. But this meant looking at the possibility that they had not just waited for Liam to die, they might have helped him along. I sat in Liam's room, a room they never entered, and held his old college sweatshirt, the last thing of his that still smelled like him. I had to make a choice. I could stop here, fight for the house, and let the rest lie buried. Or I could know. I had to know. "If the truth is worse than I can imagine," I whispered into the fabric, "then it needs the light more than anything." Marcus took the evidence to an assistant district attorney named Rachel Klein. She was young, ambitious, and looking to make a name for herself by prosecuting elder fraud, a crime that rarely saw a courtroom. She saw our case, Franklin's gambling debts, the fake medical reports from Hallister, the suspicious trust, and the cloud over Liam's death as the perfect, interconnected web. She saw the case that could take down Hallister and make headlines. The three of us met in a private room at the library. This was no longer just about getting my house back. "We cannot just arrest them," Rachel explained, her voice sharp and precise. "Franklin's debts make him desperate. Vanessa is greedy. We are not just going to rescue you, Eleanor. We are going to use their own flaws to lure them into a trap they cannot escape. It is time for you to write the next act of this play." I leaned into the role they had written for me. My cooperation became my weapon. I started getting the times wrong, asking Franklin if it was morning when the sun was high in the sky. I accidentally spilled a full glass of water on the stack of mail, right in front of Vanessa, and then apologized profusely for my clumsiness. The wall clock in the dining room watched it all, my silent, ticking witness. Every sigh of frustration from Franklin, every exasperated look Vanessa threw him, was captured. Her condition is deteriorating faster. I heard Franklin tell Dr. Hallister over the phone. his voice a perfect blend of sorrow and exhaustion. Their desperation made them sloppy. Franklin was pushing the house sale aggressively, accepting an offer that was well below market value because he needed the cash fast. Vanessa was a different kind of nervous. She was on the phone constantly, her voice a low hiss. I heard the name Victor spoken like a curse. He is adding interest daily. Franklin Victor does not care about your process. She screamed at him one night, thinking I was asleep. Rachel's instructions were cold and absolute. You are going to sign everything they put in front of you, she told me over the secure phone. But only after Marcus gets a copy. We need them to complete the fraud. Conspiracy is hard to prove. Theft is easy. It was terrifying. I was signing away my life, one paper at a time, trusting that these copies would save me. While I was legally incapacitated, I was also broke. Franklin controlled every account. I needed to build a future, one they knew nothing about. I started looking for work. The Silver Maple Suites, a decent hotel over in Bay Ridge, needed a night auditor. It was a job no one wanted. The hours were lonely. The pay was minimal. It was perfect. I needed to be away from the house for hours at a time, away from their watchful eyes. When I told them, Franklin immediately protested. Eleanor, you are not well, he said, the picture of concern. You cannot possibly manage the stress. What if you get lost? But it was Vanessa who sealed it. I was in the kitchen, pretending to look for my pills, when I heard her whisper to him in the hall. Let her go and fail. It will just make our case stronger. We can tell the judge she could not even handle a simple job. Let her wear herself out. I had to hide my smile in the pantry. The hotel was a revelation. It was a world of transients and secrets. I learned the systems quickly. I learned how the cameras recorded, which doors required keycard access, and how to read the nightly reports. I befriended the night guard, a young man named Lucas. He was kind, mostly bored, and saw me as a harmless old woman. He had no idea he was becoming a crucial witness for my new life. The night shift gave me clarity. I watched people check in under fake names, couples arguing in the parking lot, businessmen making shady calls at 3 a.m. I realized that the night sees everything the day tries to hide. We were ready to spring the trap. Marcus and Rachel arranged for the bait. An anonymous, official-looking letter arrived at the house, addressed to the estate of Liam Hayes. I let Franklin retrieve it. I watched from the dining room as he opened it. His face went white. It was a notification about an unclaimed life insurance policy for Liam, a policy I never knew existed. They panicked. They thought this money, this windfall, might go directly to me, the confused mother. That very night, Franklin came to me with another set of papers. Mom, it seems Liam had a small policy, he said, his voice slick. It is very complicated. All this insurance paperwork, just sign here, and Vanessa and I will handle it for you. We will put it in your trust. I looked at the paper, pretending to struggle to read it. I held the pen, my hand shaking just enough. I do not know, Franklin, I said, my voice thin. I feel so tired. Let me think about it until tomorrow. The delay was exactly what Rachel needed. She used their panicked attempt to grab the insurance money to get an immediate court order, placing a freeze and a trace on all their accounts. The pressure was now critical. Marcus called me on the burner phone while I was in the hotel staff room. His voice was grim. Eleanor, our friend Victor is not bluffing. Franklin has 48 hours to pay that 600,000. Or he is done. I mean, done? He is cornered. This makes him dangerous. But it also means he has to make his move. And it has to be now. The game was no longer just about the money. It was about survival. His and mine. The rain was a cold sheet against the glass, drumming a frantic rhythm on the roof. Franklin was upstairs, zipping his bag, the sound of it like a countdown. My burner phone, hidden in the pocket of my old bathrobe, gave a single, silent vibration. I looked at the screen. One text from Marcus. They are about to disappear from the city. If you want justice, be ready tonight. The final act was starting. Franklin came down the stairs, putting on his concerned husband face, which was now just a thin, brittle mask. "Eleanor," he said, his voice artificially brisk. "I have to fly up north for a short business trip. An emergency meeting. I will be back tomorrow." I just nodded, widening my eyes in the vague, confused way they had come to expect. "Oh, all right, dear. You be safe." Vanessa, who was already by the door, chimed in, not even looking at me. "I have to go, too. A friend is having a crisis. I will stay at her place tonight." I gave them my most vacant smile. "Drive careful, both of you." I arrived at the Silver Maple Suites for my 10 p.m. shift. The hotel was quiet, the storm keeping most people indoors. The night dragged. Around midnight, I was reviewing the reservation list for the next day, and there it was. Mr. and Mrs. Carter. A late check-in for the penthouse suite. The notes were specific, arriving after 1 a.m. No bell service required. Marcus had briefed me. This was the alias. They were not going on a business trip. They were meeting the person who would launder the last of my money, turn it into cash, and help them disappear. At exactly 1:37 in the morning, the automatic doors hissed open, letting in a swirl of cold, wet air. They walked in. Franklin looked like a ghost. He was pale, thinner, his face hollowed out by stress and debt. Yet he still held his shoulders with that same old arrogance, as if he owned the very air he was breathing. Vanessa was beside him, a dark wool coat pulled tight, her face obscured by a fashionable, wide-brimmed hat. They walked right past me, toward the desk, their eyes fixed on the elevator bank. They did not recognize me. How could they? The confused, medicated old woman they had left at home could not possibly be the composed night auditor standing before them. My blood was roaring in my ears. I wanted to take the heavy stapler from the desk and throw it. Instead, I forced my voice into a flat, professional monotone. "Checking in." Franklin just grunted. "Carter. May I see your identification and a credit card, Mr. Carter?" I asked, my voice not shaking. Vanessa fumbled in her purse, her gloved hands clumsy, and produced 2 fake driver's licenses. I took them. I swiped the card. All the while, the small black dome camera above my head was recording. It was capturing their faces, their fake IDs, their presence in this room. I programmed the keycards. "Suite 420, I said, sliding them across the desk. "The elevators are to your right." As they walked away, I allowed myself to exhale. My hand, when I reached for my coffee, was trembling violently. Lucas, the security guard, wandered over. "You okay, Mrs. Hayes? Your hand is really shaking." I wrapped both hands around the cup. "Just tired. Lucas. Long night." I glanced at the monitor. watching them step into the elevator. I looked up at the lobby camera, the one filming me. "You know," I said, half to him, half to the lens. "Some guests just have faces you will want to remember later." I did not have to see what was happening upstairs. I knew the plan. Right now, Rachel's team, the Economic Crimes Unit, was watching a screen. They were waiting for Franklin to log into his laptop and make the final transfer, the one that would move the last of my trust fund into the offshore cash-out account. The court order was active. The moment he clicked that button, they had him for wire fraud. In that suite, I knew they would be arguing. Vanessa would be frantic, desperate to get the cash and get to the airport. Franklin would be hesitating, wanting to make sure he had squeezed every last penny, perhaps even thinking about that insurance policy. They would be drinking. Franklin always drank heavily when he was stressed, and they would be taking their own prescriptions, the ones they relied on. They had no idea that the complimentary bottle of high-end scotch in the suite, the one I had arranged to be there, was not what it seemed. A little addition, just enough to amplify the effects of their own anxiety pills, their own heart medication, into something volatile. My burner phone vibrated. A text from Marcus. "He is making the transfer. All systems are go. We wait until they are fully compromised. We call EMS first, then the police." We had planned for them to be disoriented, to be caught red-handed and confused. We had not planned on the smoke detector. We had not planned on them collapsing. But fate, and their own toxic chemistry, had decided to give me a little something extra. The alarm was an accident, an unscripted detail. It was a piercing shriek that ripped through the 1 a.m. silence. Lucas was already shouting from the security desk. "Smoke alarm, 4th floor." We ran. We did not wait for the elevator. We took the concrete stairs, our footsteps echoing. The smell hit us on the 3rd floor, landing acrid smoke, the smell of burnt cloth and cheap alcohol. When Lucas fumbled with the master key for suite 420, the door swung open easily, unlocked. The room was thick with haze. Vanessa, in her panic, had thrown a towel over a lamp to dim the lights, and it had smouldered. The television was on, casting a frantic, silent blue light over the scene. Franklin was on the floor, near the desk. His body was rigid, caught in the awful rhythmic grip of a convulsion. Vanessa was by the bed, half-dressed, her hands locked on the mattress, her lips a terrifying, bloodless white. Lucas grabbed his radio, his voice cracking. "We need paramedics, suite 422 down." I was the calmest person in the room. I walked past him, pulled my own phone from my uniform pocket, and dialed 911. My hand was perfectly steady. "I need an ambulance at the Silver Maple Suites in Bay Ridge," I said, my voice flat, professional. "Room 420, 2 occupants, mid-50s and mid-30s, unconscious. It appears to be a severe overdose or adverse drug reaction. Both are breathing, but the male is actively seizing." Lucas was staring at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. "Mrs. Hayes, how are you?" I looked at the man on the floor, the man who had stolen my life. I looked at the woman who had helped him. "I have been in a war for a very long time." "Lucas," I said, "this is just the end of it." The paramedics were fast, their efficiency a sharp contrast to the chaos. They moved with purpose, splitting up. One team went straight to Franklin, forcing an oxygen mask onto his face. As they worked, the lead paramedic pulled the mask away for a second to check his airway. The harsh beam of his penlight illuminated Franklin's face. I saw the deep, panicked wrinkles around his eyes, the strands of grey hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. This was not the man I married. This was a cornered animal. I stood by the door, and Lucas, still pale, heard me whisper, "I know him." The other paramedic was shaking Vanessa. Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open. She was disoriented, floating in the chemical soup they had prepared for themselves. Her gaze swept the room, the paramedics, Lucas, the flashing lights, and then it found me. It was as if she had been electrocuted. The fog in her eyes vanished, replaced by a pure, undiluted horror. She was not seeing her victim. She was seeing the impossible. "Mom," she slurred, the word thick with disbelief. "Mom, what? What are you doing here?" I said nothing. I just held her gaze. I let her look at me. I let her see, in that one long, silent moment, that the frail, confused old woman she and Franklin had been poisoning for a year was gone. I let her see the person who was standing straight, my eyes clear, my mind sharp. I let her see the person who had just watched her life implode. The next wave arrived exactly as planned, right on the heels of the ambulance. Rachel Klein walked in, flanked by 2 uniformed officers and 2 plainclothes detectives from the Economic Crimes Unit. She flashed her badge at Lucas. "This room is an active crime scene," she announced, her voice cutting through the medical chatter. "Hotel staff needs to clear the hallway." She looked at me. "Except for you, ma'am. We need you to remain to assist with identification." While the paramedics stabilized Franklin, Rachel's team went to work. They were not interested in the spilled alcohol or the burnt towel. They went straight for the laptop on the desk, which was still open. They bagged the 2 cell phones on the nightstand. One detective pulled a thick, white envelope, the cash from Franklin's open valise. They were restraining Franklin onto the gurney as he started to come to. The convulsions had stopped, but he was disoriented, fighting the straps. As they wheeled him toward the door, Rachel stepped directly in his path. "Mr. Franklin Hayes," she said, her voice loud and clear. "You are being detained on suspicion of financial fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, and theft by deception. You have the right to remain silent." She then turned to the other gurney, where Vanessa was now sobbing. "Ma'am, you are not being charged at this moment, but you are not free to leave the hospital. An officer will be accompanying you." Franklin's head swiveled, his drug-fogged eyes trying to make sense of the police, the paramedics, the woman reading him his rights. And then he saw me. I was standing in the corner, my cheap polyester uniform illuminated by the flashing red and blue lights from the hallway. He stared. He stopped fighting the straps. I watched the realization hit him, a cold, sober understanding that was more powerful than any drug. He saw it all. I was not senile. I was not incapacitated. I was not the victim. I was the witness. I was the architect. They pushed his gurney past me. He strained against the restraints, his neck muscles cording. His voice was a dry, rasping croak. "Eleanor, Eleanor, what did you do?" I stepped forward, out of the shadows. I did not raise my voice. I let him hear every steady, cold word. "I did nothing, Franklin," I said. "I just brought the truth to the place where it needed to stand. The rest is between you and the law." The bright, chaotic lights of the hotel suite were replaced by the flat, sterile fluorescence of a preliminary hearing room. The air was heavy, smelling of stale coffee and the kind of quiet desperation that permeates court buildings. This was Rachel Klein's arena. She stood before the judge, her voice crisp and methodical, as she laid out the architecture of their betrayal. The audio recordings from my bathrobe pocket. The high-definition video from the hotel lobby showing Mr. and Mrs. Carter checking in with fake IDs. The bank records showing the wire transfer from my trust fund, initiated just moments before the alarm. And, most importantly, the toxicology reports from the hospital, compared with the pills Marcus had saved, proving what I had been forced to ingest to create the symptoms. They brought in Dr. Hallister. He was tan and confident, looking every inch the respected professional. He denied everything. Of course. He spoke of patient confidentiality and complex diagnoses. Then Rachel projected Marcus's surveillance photos onto the wall. Franklin, handing over the thick white envelope. Hallister, smiling as he put it in his drawer. She followed it with the medical records of 3 other elderly patients, all recently moved into expensive care homes, all of whom had signed their assets over to family members. Their diagnostic reports, Rachel noted, were nearly identical to mine, copied and pasted, right down to the same spelling errors. Hallister's tan seemed to fade, but the deepest cut was yet to come. Marcus had not stopped at the fraud. He had gone back to Liam. Rachel presented 2 new pieces of evidence. The first was a bank withdrawal. Franklin had taken over $50,000 from our joint account the morning of the day Liam died, just hours before purchasing the boat trip. The second was a convenience store receipt, time stamped. Vanessa had purchased 2 bottles of a high-proof, obscure brand of whiskey Liam never, ever drank. 30 minutes before meeting him at the docks. Rachel was careful. We cannot, today, prove what happened on that boat, Your Honor, she said. But the motive is clear. Liam Hayes was the only person standing between these two and total control of the family estate. Then it was my turn. I sat in the witness box, not as a victim, but as the primary source. I told them everything. I spoke of the fog, the pills, the slow, terrifying realization that I was being erased. I recounted the night I woke up, the conversations in the garage, and the agonizing months of playing the frail, confused old woman. My voice did not shake. I answered every question clearly, calmly. Franklin's lawyer tried his best. He was loud, aggressive. Mrs. Hayes, isn't it true you are an easily influenced woman, that this is all a fantasy, that Mr. Doyle and the DA manipulated you into this story? Rachel simply smiled. The defense suggests Mrs. Hayes is delusional. We would like to present the defense's own evidence. She played the videos from the wall clock Franklin had installed, the one he thought was his insurance. The room watched in silence as the screen showed Franklin asking, "Mum, what month is it?" And I, clear as day, answered, "It is October. Franklin, it is the 21st?" The video showed him sighing, turning to Vanessa and saying, "She thinks it is October. See, she is gone." The recording, meant to prove my insanity, was the very thing that proved my persecution. Vanessa tried to save herself. She cried. She told the court Franklin had forced her, that she was terrified of his debts, that she was just following his orders. But Rachel was ready. She presented the text messages, Vanessa, coordinating with Dr. Hallister, Vanessa, scheduling my appointments. And finally, the text she sent to Franklin 2 nights before the hotel. She has to sign the insurance waiver tomorrow. Victor will not wait. And I am not going down because you are too soft to handle a confused old woman. She was not a follower. She was the one holding the whip. The final piece was an email, found by Marcus in Franklin's draft folder, saved but never sent. It was to a property broker in Mexico. The sale of my wife's house closes next week. It read, "She is senile and being moved into a home. The full amount, about $800,000, will be wired to your offshore account. I need the villa ready by the 15th, faced with the email, with the texts, with the videos." Franklin's composure finally shattered. He sat down heavily. When the judge asked if he understood the charges, he stopped looking at his lawyer. He looked at me. His voice was low, defeated. "I admit to the fraud. I admit to the medication. I had to pay the debt. I never meant to hurt her. I just thought—" He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper that filled the silent room. "I thought she would never be lucid enough to understand any of this. I was wrong." I looked back at him, the man I had loved for half my life, and I felt nothing. It was like looking at a complete stranger. The day of sentencing was cold, the sky a flat, unforgiving grey. I sat in the front row. The judge, a woman with eyes as sharp as Rachel's, did not mince words. She read the list of convictions. For Franklin, financial fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, felony identity theft. For Vanessa, conspiracy, perjury, and accessory to fraud. Dr. Hallister, in a separate but related case, was facing a barrage of charges that would strip him of his license and his freedom for years. Franklin, looking thin and pale in an ill-fitting suit, turned to look at me one last time before the judge spoke. His eyes were desperate. He was searching my face for one last scrap of the old Eleanor, the woman who would have offered pity, who would have believed in his weakness. He found nothing. I was not angry. I was not sad. I was just done. The tears for that man had dried up months ago. All that was left was clarity. The judge was speaking. "In cases like this," she said, her voice echoing in the quiet room, "the true horror is not the greed. It is that the betrayal comes not from a stranger, but from the very people who are meant to be a sanctuary. This court will do everything in its power to assure citizens like Mrs. Hayes that the law will protect them." She sentenced Franklin to a term that would ensure he was an old man, if he ever got out. Vanessa received a lighter sentence, but one that would shatter her 20s and 30s, a different kind of life sentence. The moment the gavel fell, my own lawyer, who had been sitting beside me, stood up. She filed the motions we had prepared. One to immediately nullify every document I had signed under the influence of Hallister's medication. One to restore my full legal authority and reclaim my home. The judge approved them on the spot, adding a note for the record that all previous diagnoses of my cognitive decline were to be considered fraudulent, the product of a criminal conspiracy. They led Franklin out in handcuffs. The press, having caught wind of the verdict, was a storm of flashing cameras in the hallway. We were pushed together in the bottleneck. He was allowed a final word. He stopped, his guard holding his arm. "Eleanor," he rasped, his voice raw. "I am not a monster. I was weak. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to." I looked him in the eye. "We know to fear monsters, Franklin. We can avoid them. But weakness, Weakness always claims to be the victim. You chose to be both. His face crumpled. The guard pulled him away. I stood on the courthouse steps and watched the white transport van pull away from the curb. The wind whipped my coat around my legs. I did not wave. I did not turn away. I stood there, rigid, until the van turned the corner and disappeared from view. It was a funeral. Not for him, but for the woman I had been, the woman who had trusted him so completely, so blindly, for so long. She was finally gone. I went back to work at the Silver Maple Suites. The manager called me into his office the next day. "Eleanor," he said, "I have two things. First, this." He pushed a check across the desk. "It is a bonus. Your handling of that situation was the most professional thing I have ever seen. Second, I am offering you the night manager position, with a raise." It is a quiet life. A few weeks later, near 3 a.m, an elderly gentleman was in the lobby, struggling with an online bank form. He looked up, his eyes full of fear. "My nephew keeps helping me with this," he whispered. "But the numbers, they do not add up." I watched him for a moment. Then I went to my locker and got a business card. I wrote a number on the back. "This is Marcus Doyle," I said, sliding it to him. "Do not sign anything you do not understand. You are not confused, sir. They just want you to think you are." Tonight, a rowdy wedding party just stumbled through the lobby, laughing and loud, full of life. They are gone now. I am sitting here, behind the desk. The monitors show the empty hallways, the quiet back door, the parking lot gleaming under the rain. I touch the chain around my neck, the one that was Liam's. "See, son," I whisper to the empty lobby. "I put them right where they belong." I look out the glass doors, not into the past, not into the future, just at the steady, cold peace of the night. It is not a warm light, this neon glow. It is not romantic, but it is always on when you need it. I stand up and walk to the main light switch, dimming the bright overheads, leaving just enough light for anyone who might be lost and trying to find their way in from the dark. The little red light on the camera above my head is still blinking, but it is not watching me anymore. I am the one watching it. I am in control of the frame. I decide what the world gets to see, and what I keep, just for me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where in the world you are listening from. So please, drop a comment below and let us all connect and share our thoughts. And if this story moved you, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and show your support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear it.